A man sits in a cramped workshop in Ephesus, his hands calloused from pulling thick needles through tent canvas, that it is time for them to pass on. We read poems at funerals about leaves falling in the autumn and rivers flowing into the sea. He uses a completely different Greek word to describe exactly what the Creator intends to do to it. Open an English Bible to 1 Corinthians 15, verse 6, and trace your finger across the ink. You will almost always find the exact same heavy, definitive verb staring back at you. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. The word Paul uses in his dictation is the Greek verb katargeo. It appears 27 times in the New Testament, and the mechanics of the word are fascinating. It is a compound. The prefix kata means down or thoroughly. The root word is argos, which means idle, inactive, or useless. To katargeo an enemy is not necessarily to vaporize them into thin air. It is to render them completely inoperative. It is to walk up to a terrifying, roaring machine, reach behind the heavy iron gears, and sever the power cord so that the mechanism grinds to a permanent halt. It is to force an authority into absolute unemployment. Paul uses this exact same word years later in his second letter to Timothy. Writing from a cold Roman prison cell, he declares that Jesus Christ has appeared and has katargeo abolished. Paralyzed, rendered entirely ineffective, the power of death itself. We look at the absolute devastation of the grave, and we tell ourselves that this is just the way the universe was designed to work. He uses the same verb in Romans 6 to describe how the heavy, suffocating weight of human sin has been stripped of its jurisdiction over the human mind. That root changes everything. When Paul says the grave will be destroyed, he is not speaking in abstract spiritual metaphors. He is declaring a literal, cosmic bankruptcy. He is saying the industry of dying is going to be forced out of business. Death is not an eternal reality we must eventually make peace with. It is a trespassing power that will be permanently neutralized. To katargeo the grave means that a morning is coming when the soil will simply refuse to hold another body. The morticians will lock their doors. The stonecutters will stop carving dates into granite. The physiological mechanism of decay will be stripped of its authority, standing idle and useless in the presence of the one who originally authored life. But here is what most people miss. Paul is not writing this letter to the fractured church in Corinth based on a vague, philosophical hope for the distant future. He is not just giving them a comforting theory to hold on to while they bury their friends. He is basing this entire cosmic eviction notice on a single, verifiable historical event. But if you look closer at what the Apostle Paul actually dictates in the 15th chapter of this letter, because before the enemy can be completely eradicated at the end of time, the machine had to be broken from the inside. The breathing stops. A chest falls on a blood-stained crossbeam and does not rise again. The sky turns black at midday. The earth violently shakes. But the body hanging in the Judean heat is entirely still. They pry the iron spikes from the wood. They lower the dead weight into waiting arms. You can smell the sharp, medicinal tang of myrrh and aloe mixing with sweat and dirt. They wrap the limbs tightly and thick. Heavy linen. They carry the carpenter into a cavern cut straight out of the bedrock. They roll a massive limestone wheel into the groove, sealing the entrance in absolute darkness. For 3 days, the oldest enemy in the universe believes it has won. The ancient machine is running exactly as it has since Eden. The ground always opens. The soil always wins. The intruder always claims the final word. The grave swallows the author of life just as easily as it swallowed the first man, formed from the dust. But then, Sunday morning breaks over the hills. A single heartbeat thuds in. The pitch-black silence of the rock. Lungs expand. Eyes open. Bare feet step onto the freezing stone floor. The linen wrappings are, you start to see something the natural cycle reading completely misses. Death is not a transition. It is an invasion, left behind. Folded and discarded like an empty cocoon. The massive limestone wheel is not just pushed aside, it is rendered utterly irrelevant. The man who walks out of the garden is breathing a completely different kind of air. He carries the scars of the execution, but his cells are no longer subject to the decay of the earth. He has crossed the boundary line of mortality, and he is never coming back. The empty tomb is not a spiritual metaphor. It is a demolition. He entered the belly of the beast. He walked into the deepest, darkest chamber of the human experience. He allowed the heavy iron gates to slam shut behind him, and then he tore the hinges off the door from the inside out. When Paul writes to Corinth, "This is the anchor," he throws down into the violent sea of their philosophy. Christ is the first fruits. He is the prototype. He is the physical proof that the enemy's jurisdiction has an expiration date. The machine has been broken. The power cord has been severed. The trespasser has been publicly humiliated, and its ultimate end has been guaranteed. But this raises an immediate, agonizing question for the people sitting in the gatherings in Ephesus, in Corinth, and in every church building today. If the enemy is already defeated, the real question of 1 Corinthians 15 isn't just about what happens to us after we take our last breath. It's this: why does the ground still open? Why does the room still feel so unbearably empty when the hospital machines finally flatline? The phone rings in the middle of the night. You walk into a brightly lit hospital room where the rhythmic hum of the medical monitors has finally gone completely quiet. You stand under a black umbrella in the freezing rain, watching thick mud being shoveled over a heavy wooden lid. If the ancient machine has been broken, why does it still swallow the people we love? If the first-century tomb is empty, why do we still have to buy plots of dirt today? Because Paul's timeline in 1 Corinthians 15 is stubbornly, painfully realistic. He calls death the last enemy to be destroyed, not the first, not the easiest, the final outpost of the rebellion. We are living in the violent, messy overlap of two ages. The decisive invasion has already happened. The Creator has already walked out of the rock, breathing uncorrupted air. The mortal blow has been delivered, but we are still standing on the battlefield while the enemy forces retreat. The head of the serpent has been crushed, but the tail is still thrashing wildly in the dirt. We still have to walk through the quiet hospital corridors. We still have to. What exactly is standing over the grave? Paul was not offering a poetic comfort for a grieving family. Sign the agonizing paperwork. We still have to face the intruder. But because of that Sunday morning in Jerusalem, the fundamental nature of the encounter has been irreversibly altered. When the philosophers in Corinth told people to stop weeping because the soul was simply returning to the cosmos, they were demanding surrender. When modern eulogies tell us to find peace with a passing because it is just the beautiful circle of life, they are asking us to make a treaty with the saboteur. They are asking us to call the vandal a friend. The biblical text demands the exact opposite. The New Testament never tells you to stand by a casket and pretend the universe is working perfectly. Jesus himself stood outside the tomb of his friend Lazarus, fully knowing he was about minutes away from tearing the gates of death wide open, and his chest heaved with weeping. He was furious. He felt the absolute obscenity of the curse. He looked at the corpse of a man he loved, and he saw the vandalism of Eden. Grief is not a failure of theology. It is a deeply biblical protest. The tears you cry when the house is too quiet are not a surrender to the natural order. They are a violent rejection of it. They are the physical evidence that your soul remembers the original garden. He was diagnosing a cosmic hostility. He was pointing a finger at a disease that most people have simply accepted as a permanent roommate, and anticipates the promised resurrection. You cry because you know, deep in your marrow, that the grave is a trespasser. You still have to face the ekthros, but you face an enemy that has been served a cosmic eviction notice. You stand at the edge of the dirt, but you do not stand there like the rest of the world. You stand there knowing exactly how the timeline ends. A curse falls on the garden, and the slow march toward the dust begins. A fractured church accepts the grave, and an apostle writes a letter declaring war. A master plants a field of wheat, and an enemy works in the dark to sabotage the harvest. A cosmic king descends from the sky, and the spiritual authorities are dragged in heavy iron chains. A violent trespasser claims every generation, and a single Greek verb promises its absolute bankruptcy. A massive limestone wheel seals a Judean cavern, and the author of life tears the hinges off from the inside out. A modern cemetery demands our quiet surrender, and an empty tomb gives us the ultimate right to rebel. One trespasser, one definitive end. But maybe the part that stays, with me most, is the image of that machine. The sheer weight of the word katargio. It is not a philosophical comfort. To feel the weight of what he is claiming, you have to look at the exact words he chooses to deploy when he finally addresses. It is not a poetic sentiment about the changing of the seasons. It is the literal, physical severing of the power cord to the oldest industry on Earth. It is the breathtaking promise that a morning is coming when the soil will simply refuse to hold another body, and the morticians will permanently lock their doors. If you are in a season where the house is entirely too quiet, if you are standing in the freezing rain beside a freshly dug plot of dirt, or sitting in a sanitized room listening to the final, slow hum of a medical monitor, feeling the absolute wrongness of the moment in your chest, do not let anyone tell you to just accept the circle of life. Your grief is not a lack of faith. It is the echo of Eden. You are allowed to hate the intruder. You are allowed to weep for the vandalism of the garden, because you serve a king who wept outside a tomb right before he emptied it. And may the God who has already broken the oldest machine in the universe meet you in the middle of your darkest valleys and give you the unshakable certainty that the grave does not get the final word, the end of all things. But to see the enemy clearly, you first have to understand how completely we have misunderstood the original design. We sanitize the hospital rooms. We pump the veins with chemicals. We buy the heavy oak boxes. We lower them into the ground. The air in the first-century commercial district is heavy with the smell of tanned leather and the salt of the Aegean Sea. We tell ourselves, it is just part of the journey. It is the most common lie humanity tells itself. A leaf falls from a tree. A river dries in the summer heat. A star burns out in the cold dark. We look at the natural world and assume human death is exactly the same biological necessity. The philosophers in Corinth certainly did. They walked the crowded, sun-baked streets of their Greek city. They listened to the orators in the marketplace. They absorbed the cultural air they breathed. And that air taught them something specific. It taught them that the physical body was just a heavy, rotting cage. It taught them the soul was trapped inside, waiting for release. To them, the grave was not a tragedy. The grave was a jailbreak. We do not use the same words today, but we hold the exact same posture. We call it the circle of life. We call it passing away. We call it finding peace. The vocabulary changes. The coping mechanism remains. Look at a modern funeral. The black suits, the quiet voices, the overwhelming scent of cut lilies designed to mask the reality of the room. We stand on the manicured grass. We listen to the eulogy. We hear the slow, rhythmic thump of dirt hitting the wooden lid. He is dictating a letter to a city 300 miles away. He is writing to Corinth, a chaotic, fractured church he planted. And someone always says it. It was just their time. We say it to survive the moment. We say it because the alternative is too terrifying to hold. If death is just a biological necessity, we can accept it. If death is just the closing of a chapter, we can make peace with it. But the human soul rejects this lie every time it encounters the reality of a corpse. You feel the wrongness in your chest. You feel the absolute violation of the moment. You do not look at the cold, still hands of someone you love, and think about the beauty of the natural order. You feel robbed. That feeling is not a lack of faith. It is the most accurate theological response you can have. Your grief is not a weakness. It is a rebellion. It is the echo of a world that was designed to never end. We ache for permanence because we were built for it. We rage against the grave because we were never meant to enter it. The Apostle Paul understood this. He knew that to treat death as a friend, or even as a neutral transition, was to surrender the entire biblical narrative. Death is not a natural phenomenon. It is a hostile occupation. And to understand how the occupation began, you have to go back to the place where the soil was first cursed, that is currently tearing itself apart over spiritual pride and moral collapse. But as the scribe scratches ink onto the papyrus, a man formed from damp, red earth lies still on the ground. The Creator leans close. Breath enters lungs for the very first time. The chest expands. The eyes open to see a canopy of green and a sky completely unmarred by decay. This is the original design. The physical body is not a cage holding a soul hostage. It is a masterpiece forged by the hands of God Himself. In the Garden of Eden, there is no expiration date stamped onto human cells. There are no graveyards waiting in the valleys. There is only the rhythm of life, designed to perpetuate endlessly in the presence of the one who authored it. The physical world is declared good, and humanity is commanded to cultivate it, to walk in the cool of the evening with their Maker, without the shadow of the grave hanging over their steps. Then comes the fracture. A choice is made in the shade of a forbidden tree. A hand reaches out. A fruit is tasted, and the architecture of the cosmos cracks. The invasion does not happen with an army marching over a hill. It happens with a curse pronounced over the soil. The ground that gave birth to the man will now require his sweat, his pain, and eventually, his bones. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. The earth opens its mouth for the first time. The man changes his tone. The deepest problem in Corinth is not just how they are living. It is what they believe about dying. The damp red clay dries out, turning to stinging dust in the wind. The garden is closed, and the long, slow march toward the tomb begins. Death was not part of the blueprint. It is a parasite feeding on the goodness of creation. When humanity rebelled, they did not just break a moral rule. They disconnected themselves from the source of life itself, like a branch severed from a tree. The branch might look green for a few days. It might still hold its leaves in the sun. But the reality is already settled. The withering has begun. This is why the Jewish worldview, the worldview Paul was deeply rooted in, always viewed a corpse as an obscenity. A Jewish scholar in the 1st century did not look at a grave and see a freed spirit. They looked at a grave and saw the tragic, horrific unraveling of Genesis chapter 1. They saw the wages of human rebellion. They saw an unnatural intruder that had no right to be there in the beginning. So when Paul sits in Ephesus and dictates his letter to the Corinthians, he is not trying to help them accept the grave. He is trying to expose its true identity. And to do that, he reaches for a single Greek word that completely dismantles the idea of a peaceful transition. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 16. Paul is laying out the chronological sequence of Christ's ultimate victory. People in the congregation have started standing up in the gatherings and claiming that physical resurrection is a myth. He is systematically describing the final subjugation of every cosmic power, every earthly authority, and every spiritual dominion that stands in rebellion against the Creator. He is sketching out the end of history itself. And then, at the very climax of this cosmic timeline, he points a finger directly at the grave. He writes, "The last enemy to be destroyed is death." The word he chooses for enemy in this sentence is the Greek ekthros. It appears over 100 times in the New Testament, and its range of meaning leaves absolutely no room for philosophical neutrality. It does not mean a competitor in a contest. It does not mean a rival or a natural obstacle that a human being simply has to climb over or peacefully accept. Ekthros means deeply, actively, and irreconcilably hostile. It is a noun derived from the root word ekthos, which literally translates to a visceral, burning hatred. To a 1st century Greek speaker, this word does not describe an impersonal force of nature or a biological inevitability. This describes a malignant, personal adversary bent on your absolute ruin. If uncovering the weight of the original Greek text is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper. They are looking at the graveyards outside their city walls and deciding that the physical body does not matter. Into the text than you knew was possible. So Paul looks at the cemetery and he names the saboteur. It is the exact same word Matthew uses in his gospel when Jesus tells the parable of the weeds secretly sown in the wheat field. When the servants wake up and discover the poisonous weeds choking out the life of the good harvest, the master replies, "An ekthros has done this. An enemy. A vandal who operates under the cover of darkness, specifically to destroy what the master has planted." That root changes everything. When Paul calls death an ekthros, he is violently stripping away all the philosophical poetry we use to make ourselves feel better about the end of a life. He refuses to dress the corpse in the comfortable language of natural cycles, seasonal changes, or beautiful transitions into the cosmos. He is looking at the people in Corinth who are trying to make friends with the grave, and he is telling them they are making a treaty with a monster. Death is not a natural biological process we must learn to accept. It is a hostile intruder that must be overthrown. And the specific language Paul uses to describe that overthrow reveals a blueprint for the entire universe. A trumpet blast echoes across a valley. The sky tears open. A king descends. Paul is not just writing abstract theology in his workshop in Ephesus, that death is just a natural, beautiful release of the immortal soul into the cosmos. It is the same human impulse, showing up again and again. He is mapping out a war. Look at the sequence he dictates in 1 Corinthians 15. It reads exactly like a Roman military campaign. Paul lives in the Roman Empire. He knows what a victory looks like. He has seen the legions return from the frontier. When a Roman general conquers a territory, he does not just declare victory from a distance and leave. He marches through the streets. He drags the captured kings behind his chariot in heavy iron chains. You can smell the crushed petals thrown on the paving stones. You can hear the deafening roar of the crowd. You can see the complete, public humiliation of the enemy forces. The general secures the territory. He dismantles the enemy infrastructure. He crushes every last pocket of resistance. This is the exact imagery Paul applies to the cosmos. Step 1. A heavy stone is rolled away in a Jerusalem garden. Christ the firstfruits. The beachhead is established. Step 2. The skies part. The shout is given. Those who belong to him are pulled up from the dirt. Step 3. The final mop-up operation. Paul writes that Christ must reign until he has put every single enemy under his feet. The language is brutal. It is visceral. You can almost hear the heavy thud of a boot coming down on the neck of a defeated rival. Most people assume death is just a natural part of the cycle of life. We stand by quiet hospital beds and say, "He crushes the corrupt earthly thrones. He shatters the invisible dominions. He breaks the principalities that have enslaved human history." Every spiritual power that profits from human misery is dragged into the blinding light and stripped of its armor. The systems of greed fall. The empires built on blood collapse. The resurrection is not a quiet spiritual metaphor. It is a hostile takeover. It is the aggressive reclaiming of a stolen world. But as Paul maps out this cosmic timeline, he reveals that there is one final adversary left standing on the battlefield. After the demons flee, after the corrupt rulers are chained, after the earth stops shaking from the march of the victorious king, one giant, ancient fortress remains. The grave itself. It is the oldest saboteur. It is the one that has swallowed every human being since the dirt of Eden. It is the one that thinks it holds the ultimate veto power over the love of God. Paul says death is the last enemy to be dealt with, but he does not say it will be reformed. He does not say it will be tamed. He does not say it will be transformed into a friend.